The crystal chandeliers of Dubai's most exclusive hotel ballroom cast their golden glow over the gathering of the world's elite. Karim Al-Rahman stood at the center of it all, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing admiring glances from every corner of the room. At 35, he had built an empire that stretched across continents, earning him not just billions, but a reputation for being untouchable. Tonight's charity gala was meant to be another jewel in his crown, another demonstration of his power and influence. "Quite the spectacle you've arranged, Karim," came a familiar voice, smooth as silk but laced with challenge. Hassan al-Rashid, Karim's longtime business rival, approached with a glass of sparkling water in hand. "Though I wonder if all this," he gestured at the opulent surroundings, "really brings you any satisfaction anymore." Karim's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Hassan had a way of getting under his skin, had done so since their university days. "The satisfaction comes from knowing that tonight's donations will help thousands," he replied coolly. Hassan's laugh was soft but pointed. "Always the diplomatic answer, but we both know you're bored, my friend. When was the last time you faced a real challenge?" "Perhaps you'd like to propose one?" Karim's dark eyes glinted with interest despite himself. Their rivalry had always pushed him to greater heights. "As a matter of fact, I would." Hassan stepped closer, lowering his voice. $2 million says you can't transform someone from the streets into high society in 3 months. Karim scoffed. "That's hardly a challenge with the right teachers and resources." But there's more," Hassan interrupted. "You have to marry her, live with her, prove that your money and influence can truly transform someone's entire existence." The conversation around them continued to buzz, but Karim heard nothing but the pounding of his own heart. It was outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Yet he felt the familiar surge of competitive spirit rising within him. "And how would you measure success?" he asked carefully. "Present her at the International Business Gala 3 months from now. If she can convince everyone she belongs there, you win. If anyone suspects her true origins, or if you fail to complete the 3 months of marriage, I win." Karim should have dismissed it immediately. He was above such games. Yet something about the challenge awakened a hunger in him he hadn't felt in years. "And what makes you think I'd risk my reputation for such a bet?" Hassan's smile widened. "Because you believe you can't lose. Because you truly think your money can reshape reality itself." Later that night, Karim stood on his penthouse balcony, the Dubai skyline glittering before him like scattered diamonds. The bet seemed simultaneously beneath him and irresistible. His eyes drifted to the streets below, and that's when he saw her. She sat in an alley, partially hidden in shadows. Her clothes were worn and oversized, her dark hair tangled and hiding most of her face. Something about her stillness caught his attention. Even in obvious despair, there was a dignity in her posture that he couldn't quite explain. Before he could second-guess himself, Karim was taking the private elevator down to the street level. His security team scrambled to follow, but he waved them back. As he approached the woman, she quickly gathered her few possessions, clearly preparing to flee. "Wait," he called out, his voice softer than usual. "I have a proposition for you." She froze, then slowly turned to face him. Despite the dirt and exhaustion evident on her face, her eyes were sharp and intelligent. They narrowed with suspicion as he approached. "My name is Karim Al-Rahman," he began, then paused, realizing how absurd his next words would sound. "I would like to offer you a deal. Marriage for 3 months. In exchange, you'll receive $1 million, a roof over your head, and a completely new life." The woman stared at him as if he had lost his mind. Perhaps he had. But when she finally spoke, her voice was clear and steady, though filled with bitter amusement. "And why would someone like you make such an offer to someone like me?" "Because I believe anything is possible with the right resources," he answered, repeating the words that had gotten him into this situation in the first place. "Because I'm offering you a chance to never spend another night on these streets." She hugged her worn jacket closer, and for a moment he thought she would run. Then she lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "And what happens after 3 months? You'll have your money and your freedom. You can build whatever life you want." The woman was silent for a long moment, her mind clearly racing behind those extraordinary eyes. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Sophia, and I think you're going to regret this offer." Karim smiled, extending his hand to help her up. "We'll see about that." The marriage ceremony was as cold as the marble walls of the registry office. Sophia stood beside Karim in a simple beige dress that his assistant had hurriedly purchased that morning, her freshly washed hair still damp at the ends. No flowers, no music, no celebrations, just the scratch of pens on paper and the hollow echo of official stamps. Karim watched his new bride from the corner of his eye, noting how she held herself with unexpected poise despite the strangeness of the situation. She had cleaned up well enough with just a shower and basic grooming, hinting at the transformation to come. Yet there was something else about her that nagged at the edges of his consciousness, something he couldn't quite place. The drive to his desert mansion was silent, the stretch limousine's smooth motion almost hypnotic. Sophia stared out the tinted windows, her expression unreadable as the Dubai skyline gradually gave way to the rolling dunes of the desert landscape. When they finally pulled up to the gates of his estate, he heard her sharp intake of breath. The mansion rose from the desert like a modern palace, its white walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. Fountains cascaded down artificial waterfalls, and manicured gardens created an oasis in the sand. It was designed to impress, and even Sophia's carefully maintained composure cracked at the sight. "This will be your home for the next 3 months, Karim stated, leading her through the grand entrance. "Your transformation begins immediately." As if on cue, a team of professionals emerged from various doorways. A stylist, a fashion consultant, an etiquette coach, a personal trainer, and several other specialists formed a semicircle around them. Sophia instinctively stepped backward, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "These people will help you become who you need to be," Karim explained, his tone businesslike. "You'll follow their instructions precisely. Everything about you will be refined. Your appearance, your speech, your manners, your knowledge of our social circles." Sophia's eyes flashed. "And who exactly do I need to be?" "Someone acceptable in my world." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw her flinch slightly before her expression hardened. "Of course," she replied, her voice dripping with barely concealed sarcasm. "Heaven forbid you be seen with someone genuine." Before he could respond, the team swept her away to begin their work. Karim retreated to his office, trying to focus on business matters, but his mind kept drifting to the woman now being transformed under his roof. There was something about her defiance that both irritated and intrigued him. Hours later, he emerged, to find Sophia seated in the formal dining room, now dressed in an elegant navy blue dress that highlighted her slender frame. Her hair had been styled, her makeup expertly applied, and her posture was perfect as she practiced the proper use of various formal dining utensils. "Better," he commented, taking a seat across from her, "though there's still much work to be done." Sophia carefully set down her soup spoon, exactly as she had just been taught. "Tell me, Mr. Al-Rahman, what makes someone acceptable in your world? Is it just the proper way to hold a spoon, or is there a specific way we should breathe as well?" Her quiet rebellion sparked something in him, admiration perhaps, though he wouldn't admit it. "Cynicism won't serve you well in high society, my dear." "No? I thought it was a prerequisite." She picked up her wineglass, holding it exactly as instructed, but her eyes over the rim were challenging. Karim found himself fighting back a smile. "You're here by choice, remember? $1 million for 3 months of cooperation seems more than fair." "Ah, yes. Because everything can be bought, isn't that right?" She set down her glass with precise control. "Including people?" The question hit closer to home than he expected. "You agreed to this arrangement." "I did," she acknowledged, her voice softening slightly. "But I wonder if you understand what you've actually purchased." Before he could respond, the etiquette coach returned to continue their lesson. Karim watched as Sophia turned her attention back to her training, but her words echoed in his mind. There was something about her, a depth, an intelligence, a strength that hadn't been part of his calculations when he made this bet. That evening, as he reviewed the day's progress with his team, The head stylist approached with an unusual request. "Sir, about the birthmark." Karim looked up from his papers. "What birthmark?" "On her left shoulder, sir. A rather distinctive crescent shape. We were wondering if you'd like us to cover it with makeup for formal events." The papers slipped from his suddenly numb fingers, scattering across the marble floor. That birthmark, it couldn't be. His mind raced back 15 years, to another woman with the same marking, to promises made and a family torn apart. But it was impossible. She had been lost in the chaos, presumed gone forever. "Sir?" The stylist's concerned voice brought him back to the present. "Should we cover it?" "No," he managed to say, his throat tight. "No, leave it exactly as it is." Sleep eluded Karim that night. He paced the length of his private study, his mind racing with possibilities. The crescent-shaped birthmark haunted him, an exact mirror of the one Amira had worn with pride. Amira, his first love, whose family had been torn apart during the political upheaval. She had spoken often of her little sister, a child who had vanished during the chaos. Could Sophia be that lost sister? The coincidence seemed impossible, yet the timing aligned perfectly. Sophia's approximate age, her mysterious past, and now that distinctive birthmark, it all pointed to an incredible possibility. But if his suspicions were correct, how could he ever tell her the truth? How could he admit that their marriage, begun as a cruel bet, might be intertwined with her long-lost family history? Morning found him still awake, watching the sun rise. Over the desert, through his floor-to-ceiling windows, a soft knock at the door interrupted his troubled thoughts. "Enter," he called out, expecting his assistant with the morning briefing. Instead, Sophia stood in the doorway, already dressed for her daily lessons in a simple but elegant cream-colored dress. The stylists had done their work well. Her dark hair fell in soft waves, and her makeup was subtle but flawless. Yet it was her natural grace that caught his attention, a quality no amount of training could instill. "Your staff said I might find you here," she said, stepping into the room. "I wanted to discuss the schedule for today's lessons." Karim gestured for her to sit in one of the leather armchairs facing his desk, studying her features more carefully now. How had he not seen it before? The same high cheekbones, the same determined set of the jaw. She was so like Amira, it made his heart ache. "Is something wrong?" Sophia asked, noticing his intense scrutiny. "Do I have something on my face that would embarrass you in your precious high society?" Her sarcasm snapped him out of his reverie. "No, you look suitable," he managed, earning a raised eyebrow in response. "High praise indeed," she murmured, smoothing her skirt. "I wanted to ask about the charity gala next week. Your social secretary seems to think I'm ready for a test run in public." The thought of presenting her so soon made him unexpectedly anxious. "Absolutely not. You're not ready." The secretary seemed to think otherwise. She said my progress has been remarkable. I said no. His tone was sharper than intended, driven by a sudden protective instinct he couldn't quite explain. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "I thought the whole point of this arrangement was to prepare me for such events. Unless there's something you're not telling me." The direct question hit too close to home. Karim stood abruptly, walking to the window. "The arrangement is for me to decide when you're ready. That's what you agreed to." "Actually," she countered, rising as well, "I agreed to marriage for 3 months in exchange for a new life. I didn't agree to be your puppet, dancing only when you pull the strings." Her words stirred something in him, admiration mixed with frustration. She had Amira's spirit too, that same unwillingness to be controlled. "This isn't up for discussion." "Everything about my life seems to be up for discussion except what I want," she shot back. "The way I dress, the way I speak, the way I eat, everything must be molded to your specifications. But heaven forbid I actually participate in the decisions about my own transformation." Karim turned to face her, struck by the passion in her voice. The morning sun streaming through the windows caught the highlights in her hair, and for a moment, the resemblance to Amira was so strong it took his breath away. "You don't understand the complexities involved," he said finally, his voice quieter. "Then help me understand," she challenged. Because right now, it seems like you're hiding something." She was right, of course. He was hiding something monumental. But how could he tell her? How could he explain that every time he looked at her now, he saw the ghost of a past he'd never fully left behind? "The gala can wait," he said firmly. "Focus on your lessons for now." Sophia stood her ground for a moment longer, searching his face as if trying to read the secrets hidden there. Finally, she nodded once, curtly. "As you wish, Mr. Al-Rahman. After all, you've bought and paid for my compliance, haven't you?" She turned and walked out of the study, her posture perfect, her movements graceful, everything his teachers had trained her to be, yet it was her untamed spirit, so familiar, and so precious that left him shaken. Once she was gone, Karim sank into his chair and picked up his phone. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Ahmed, it's Karim. I need you to investigate something for me. Discreetly." He paused, gathering his courage. "I need you to look into the background of a woman named Sophia. Focus on any connections to the political upheaval 15 years ago. And Ahmed, this is absolutely confidential. No one can know what you're looking for." As he hung up the phone, Karim realized he was stepping onto a path from which there might be no return. If Sophia truly was Amira's lost sister, everything would change. The bet, the marriage, his carefully controlled world, none of it would ever be the same. Sophia stood before the full-length mirror in her luxurious suite, examining her reflection with a critical eye. 2 weeks into her transformation, and she barely recognized herself. The designer clothes, the perfectly styled hair, the elegant makeup. It was like wearing someone else's skin. Yet beneath all the polished refinement, she could still see traces of the woman she'd been, stubborn and unbroken. Her fingers absently traced the crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder, the only part of herself she'd been allowed to keep unchanged. She'd noticed how Karim's eyes always lingered on it during their brief interactions, how his expression would shift when he caught sight of it. There was something there, something beyond his obvious disapproval of her every move. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called out, adjusting her silk robe. Maria, her personal maid, though Sophia still struggled with the concept of having servants, stepped into the room. "Mr. Al-Rahman requests your presence in the garden for breakfast, miss." Sophia nodded, already moving to her massive walk-in closet. "Thank you, Maria. I'll be down shortly." As she dressed in a light blue sundress that probably cost more than she used to make in a year, Sophia considered her strange new reality. The lessons in etiquette, culture, and social graces filled her days, but it was the mysteries surrounding her husband that occupied her thoughts. She found Karim waiting in the garden pavilion, his attention focused on a tablet displaying financial news. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, something like pain flickered across his features before his usual mask of cool indifference settled back into place. "You're late," he commented, setting aside the tablet. "The view from my gilded cage was particularly captivating this morning," she replied sweetly, taking her seat across from him. A small smile tugged at his lips despite himself. "Your sarcasm is improving, almost sophisticated enough for high society now. I learned from the best." She reached for a croissant, her movements deliberately precise and proper. "Though I'm surprised you're sharing breakfast with your pet project today. No pressing business matters." Karim's expression tightened. "You're not a project." "No, then what am I?" She met his gaze directly, challenging him. "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm either a project or a possession. Which is it?" He didn't answer immediately, instead watching as she prepared her tea, with the exact movements their etiquette coach had drilled into her. When he finally spoke, his voice was unusually soft. "What do you remember about your childhood, Sophia?" The question caught her off guard. They had never discussed her past before. "Why do you ask?" "Curiosity," he said, but there was something else in his tone, something almost desperate. Sophia set down her teacup carefully. "My memories before the streets are fragmented. There was a home once, I think. A family. But it's all very hazy. She paused, studying his reaction. "Why does it matter to you?" "Everything about you matters to me," he replied, then seemed to catch himself. "For the success of our arrangement, of course." "Of course," she echoed, but her mind was racing. There had been moments, increasing in frequency, when Karim's carefully maintained facade would crack, revealing something raw and real underneath. She'd caught him watching her with an expression that looked almost like recognition, followed by guilt. "Your teachers tell me you're doing well with your lessons," he said, clearly trying to change the subject. "Perhaps it's time to consider some small social gatherings, nothing too overwhelming." Sophia leaned forward slightly. "You were adamantly against the charity gala just yesterday. What changed?" "Nothing changed. I simply think you might be ready for a controlled introduction to society. Controlled by you, naturally." She couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Tell me, does it bother you that I might actually succeed at this transformation? That your little experiment might prove you right about the power of money to change someone's life?" Karim's knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "You're not." "An experiment? Then what am I?" she repeated, softer this time. "Because sometimes when you look at me, it's like you're seeing someone else entirely." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Karim stood abruptly, his breakfast barely touched. "I have meetings to attend. Your dance instructor will be here at 10. As he strode away, Sophia made a decision. She'd been passive in this arrangement for too long, accepting his mysterious behavior and cryptic responses. It was time to do some investigating of her own. That afternoon, while her etiquette coach droned on about the proper way to address various royal titles, Sophia's mind was elsewhere, forming a plan. Karim's study would hold answers. She was sure of it. She'd seen him spending long hours there, had noticed how he'd been making mysterious phone calls when he thought no one was listening. The truth about her role in this elaborate charade was hidden somewhere in that room. And tonight, while Karim was attending a business dinner in the city, she would find it. What she didn't know was that her search would uncover far more than she bargained for, truths that would shake the foundations of both their carefully constructed arrangement and their growing unspoken connection. The night wrapped around the desert mansion like a velvet cloak, broken only by the soft glow of security lights. Sophia's heart thundered in her chest as she made her way down the silent hallway toward Karim's study. She had waited until she was certain he had left for his business dinner, counting the minutes until the house settled into its nighttime routine. Her bare feet made no sound on the marble floors, one small advantage of all those dance lessons. She wore a simple black silk nightgown, having dismissed her maid early with complaints of a headache. The mansion staff had grown to trust her over the past weeks, seeing her as the proper lady she was becoming. None of them would expect her to be prowling the halls at this hour. The study door was locked, but Sophia had prepared for this. During one of her etiquette lessons, she had purposely dropped her bracelet near Karim's desk, noting how he retrieved a key from behind a loose panel in the antique bookshelf. Now, her fingers found that same panel, and behind it, the key that would unlock his secrets. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. Sophia slipped inside, closing it carefully behind her. The room smelled of leather and sandalwood, Karim's signature scent. His massive desk dominated the space, its surface meticulously organized. She hesitated for just a moment, her conscience pricking at her. Then she remembered his mysterious phone calls, his strange reactions to her birthmark, the pain that flashed across his face when he thought she wasn't looking. She started with the desk drawers, methodically working her way through files and folders. Most contained business documents, contracts, proposals, financial reports. But in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a false bottom she discovered by chance, she found something else entirely. A folder, older than the others, its edges worn. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and official-looking documents, all centered around a political upheaval from 15 years ago. Her eyes caught on a photograph of a young woman with striking features similar to her own. The woman was smiling, her arm around a younger Karim, and on her shoulder was a birthmark, a crescent shape identical to Sophia's own. The accompanying article made her blood run cold. The woman was Amira Hassan, daughter of a prominent family caught in the conflict. The article mentioned that while Amira had faced a tragic end, her younger sister had disappeared without a trace during the chaos. The sister's name was Samira. Memories crashed over Sophia like waves, fragmented images of a home filled with light and laughter, of an older sister who used to sing her to sleep, of running and chaos, and then nothing. She had been so young when it happened, and the trauma had buried these memories deep within her mind. On the streets, she had taken the name Sophia, leaving her past behind. Further documents revealed that Karim had never stopped searching for Amira's lost sister. Private investigators' reports spanning years tracked possible sightings and leads. The most recent report was dated just days ago, confirming through old hospital records and DNA analysis what Karim must have suspected since seeing her birthmark. Sophia was indeed Samira Hassan, the lost sister of his first love. The truth hit her with physical force, sending her stumbling backward. The bet with Hassan, the marriage proposal to a homeless woman, none of it had been random. Karim had recognized something in her that first night, perhaps unconsciously, and now he knew for certain who she was, but had chosen to keep this earth-shattering truth from her. Tears blurred her vision as more memories surfaced. Amira brushing her hair, teaching her to dance, promising to always protect her. Their parents' loving faces, the sound of their mother's laugh, the smell of their father's favorite tea. An entire life she had locked away was suddenly rushing back. The sound of a car pulling up to the mansion snapped her back to the present. Karim was back early. With trembling hands, she returned everything to its exact place, making sure the false bottom was perfectly aligned. She locked the study door and replaced the key, then practically ran back to her room. Safely behind her own locked door, Sophia sank to the floor, her mind reeling. She was Samira Hassan. Karim had been engaged to her sister, and now, through some twisted game of fate, she was married to him. A marriage built on a bet and steeped in secrets. The elegant bedroom suddenly felt like a beautiful trap. Every luxury around her seemed tainted by deception. The designer, clothes in her closet, the priceless jewelry, the endless lessons in refinement, none of it had been simply about winning a bet. She had been an unwitting participant in Karim's quest to reconnect with his past, to fulfill perhaps some obligation he felt toward Amira. As she heard his footsteps in the hallway, passing her door on the way to his own suite, Sophia made another discovery. Despite her anger at his deception, despite the overwhelming shock of recovering her true identity, her heart still skipped a beat at his proximity. Somewhere between the lessons and the verbal sparring and the quiet moments of connection, she had begun to fall for him. That realization was the cruelest twist of all, because now she had to decide what to do with all these unveiled truths and whether the fragile connection growing between them could survive in the harsh light of reality. The morning after her discovery, Sophia sat at her vanity, watching her reflection as her maid styled her hair for another day of lessons. Every brushstroke seemed to reveal more of Amira in her features, the same high cheekbones, the same determined set of the jaw. How had she not seen it before? How had she forgotten her own face? "You seem troubled this morning, miss," Maria commented softly, pinning up another section of hair. Sophia managed a small smile, just thinking about the upcoming social season, but her thoughts were far from social events. They were locked in that study, buried in the papers that had revealed her true identity. Samira Hassan, the name echoed in her mind like a half-remembered song. Memories continued to surface. The smell of jasmine in their family garden, the sound of Amira's laughter, the warm embrace of their mother. A knock at the door interrupted her reverie. "Mrs. Al-Rahman?" It was Karim's assistant. "Mr. Al-Rahman requests your presence in the conservatory for your morning meeting." These daily meetings had become routine, a chance for Karim to evaluate her progress and adjust her training schedule. But today, everything was different. Today, she knew why he really watched her so intently, why pain flickered in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. The conservatory was Sophia's favorite room in the mansion, a glass-enclosed garden where desert met civilization. Karim stood among the exotic flowers, his back to the door, tension visible in his shoulders. When she entered, he turned, and for a moment, his carefully maintained facade cracked. She saw the guilt in his eyes, the weight of secrets held too long. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes." He gestured to a small table set for breakfast. "Please, sit. We need to discuss your progress." Sophia took her seat, noting how her hands didn't shake as she poured her tea. Perfect control, just as she'd been taught. "My progress in becoming acceptable to your world, you mean?" "You've exceeded all expectations," he replied, studying her face. "The teachers say you're a natural at becoming someone else." She met his gaze directly. "Or perhaps at becoming who I was always meant to be." Karim's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. "What do you mean?" "It's interesting, isn't it?" she continued, maintaining her perfect posture, her perfectly modulated voice. "How some things seem to run in families. Graceful movements, certain expressions, even birthmarks." The color drained from his face. "Sophia. Or should you call me Samira?" The name felt strange on her tongue, both foreign and achingly familiar. "That is my real name, isn't it?" The coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Neither of them moved to clean it up. They stared at each other across the table, years of secrets lying exposed between them like broken glass. "How did you—" He couldn't finish the question. "Find out?" She gave a bitter laugh. "I learned from the best, didn't I? All those lessons in observation, in gathering information, in maintaining control. I put them to good use." Karim stood abruptly, pacing between the exotic plants. "You went through my private files. And you went through my life." Her composure finally cracked. "You knew who I was. You knew all along, and you kept playing this game, this twisted experiment in transformation. Was any of it real? Or was it all just your way of fulfilling some obligation to my sister?" He turned to her, his face haunted. "It wasn't like that. When I first saw you that night, I had no idea who you were, but there was something about you, something I couldn't explain. And then when I saw the birthmark—" "You launched an investigation," she finished for him. "You confirmed what you suspected, but you still didn't tell me. You just kept pushing forward with this charade." "I was trying to protect you," he insisted. "The truth, it's complicated. The truth is that I'm Amira's sister. The truth is that you were engaged to her. The truth is that you've been manipulating this entire situation from the moment you recognized me." She stood, her movements fluid with carefully learned grace. "Tell me, was the bet with Hassan even real? Or was that just a convenient excuse to get close to me?" Karim's expression crumbled. "The bet was real, but when I realized who you were, everything changed. I couldn't tell you then. I needed time to figure out how to handle it." "Handle it?" Sophia's voice was ice. "Handle me, you mean, like everything else in your perfectly controlled world?" She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Samira, please, don't." She whirled back to face him. "Don't call me that. You lost that right when you chose to keep my own identity from me. I may be Samira Hassan by birth, but you married Sophia, the woman you've been so desperately trying to transform into someone acceptable." The pain in his eyes was raw, real. "I never meant to hurt you." "But you did." She straightened her spine, channeling every lesson in poise she'd learned. "Congratulations, Mr. Al-Rahman. You've succeeded in your transformation. I'm every bit the polished, controlled society woman you wanted. I just wonder if you'll be happy with what you've created." The days following their confrontation in the conservatory took on a surreal quality. The lessons continued. Sophia insisted on it, but now every interaction was layered with unspoken tensions and painful awareness. She executed each new skill with flawless precision, her perfect manners serving as armor against the emotional turmoil beneath. Karim watched her from a distance, seeing how she threw herself into her transformation with renewed determination. She was becoming everything he'd claimed he wanted: elegant, sophisticated, the perfect society wife. Yet each perfect gesture felt like an accusation, each graceful movement a reminder of his deception. One afternoon, during a particularly challenging dance lesson, Sophia caught sight of their reflection in the ballroom's mirrored walls. She and Karim moved together flawlessly, their bodies in perfect synchronization despite the chasm between them. The image struck her with sudden clarity. This was exactly what they'd become, a beautiful performance hiding a fractured reality. "So your form is perfect," the dance instructor praised. "You move as if you were born to this life." Sophia's eyes met Karim's in the mirror. "Perhaps I was," she replied softly, "though some might say I was born to a different life entirely." The instructor, oblivious to the tension, continued his counts. But Karim's step faltered slightly, the first imperfect movement she'd seen from him since their confrontation. Later that evening, Sophia stood on her private balcony, watching the desert sunset paint the dunes in shades of gold and purple. The familiar scent of sandalwood announced Karim's presence before he spoke. "You've exceeded everyone's expectations," he said quietly, keeping his distance. "The social secretary thinks you're ready for any event now." "Of course I am." She didn't turn to face him. "Isn't that what you wanted? The perfect transformation?" "What I wanted?" He paused, struggling with words that had never come easily. To him. "What I wanted stopped mattering the moment I realized who you really were." Now she did turn, fixing him with a steady gaze. "And who am I really? Samira Hassan, the lost sister you've been searching for? Or Sophia, the street woman you married for a bet? Or perhaps I'm just a ghost of Amira, a chance for you to make amends for the past?" "You're none of those things," he replied, taking a step forward. "You're yourself, stronger and more remarkable than anyone I've ever known." "Pretty words," she said, though something in her expression softened slightly. "But they don't change what you did. You kept the truth from me, Let me struggle with fragments of memories without telling me who I really was. I was afraid," he admitted, the words seeming to cost him dearly. "Afraid that if I told you everything at once it would be too overwhelming. Afraid that you would run away before I could ensure your safety and security." "My safety?" She laughed softly. "Or your investment?" "Both," he acknowledged honestly. "At first, but then what? Then I started to see you, really see you, not as Amira's sister, not as my project, but as yourself. Your strength, your intelligence, your refusal to be fully tamed despite all our lessons. And I realized I was falling in love with who you are now, not who you were in the past." The confession hung in the air between them, unexpected and raw. Sophia felt her carefully constructed walls tremble. "Love," she whispered the word as if it might shatter. "How can you talk about love when everything between us has been built on manipulation and lies?" "Not everything," he insisted, moving closer. "Your transformation might have begun as part of a bet, but your strength, your resilience, your ability to overcome every obstacle, that's all genuinely you. And the way you've awakened feelings in me I thought were long buried, that's real, too." She turned back to the sunset, but not before he caught the glimmer of tears in her eyes. "I'm starting to remember more," she said softly. "About Amira, about our family. The memories come in fragments, but they're clearer now. She used to sing to me when I was scared. She loved you more than anything," Karim said gently. "She never stopped looking for you, never stopped believing you were alive somewhere. And when she was gone, you took up the search. It wasn't a question. I promised her I would find you, protect you, but I never expected—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in an uncharacteristically vulnerable gesture. "Never expected to find me on the streets. Never expected to marry me for a bet before realizing who I was. Never expected to fall in love with your lost fiancé's sister." Her voice held a mix of bitterness and something else, something that sounded dangerously like longing. "I never expected any of it," he admitted. "But now that I have found you, now that I know who you are, both as Samira and as the woman you've become, I can't imagine letting you go." Sophia closed her eyes, feeling the last rays of sunlight warm on her face. "The bet with Hassan," she said after a moment. "What are you going to do about it?" "Cancel it," he replied immediately. "None of that matters anymore. It mattered enough for you to marry me. And now I wish I had married you for better reasons. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth behind her. Let me prove to you that what I feel is real. Let me show you that you're not just an obligation or a project to me. She turned to face him, their bodies inches apart. And how do you propose to do that? By giving you what I should have from the beginning, the truth and the freedom to choose what you want. Stay with me, leave me, take your time to process. Everything, whatever you decide, I'll respect it. But know that my feelings for you are real, separate from any promises to Amira or any bets with Hassan. The sincerity in his voice made her heart ache. For the first time since discovering the truth, Sophia allowed herself to really look at him, to see past her anger to the man who had searched for her for years, who had recognized something in her even before he knew who she was, who was now offering her the one thing she'd never truly had, choice. The desert night wrapped around the mansion like a silk shawl, stars twinkling overhead like scattered diamonds. Sophia sat in her room, surrounded by the luxury that had become her new normal, yet feeling more conflicted than ever. Karim's confession of love echoed in her mind, competing with the memories that continued to surface. She picked up a framed photograph she'd requested from Karim's files, a picture of her family from before. Her fingers traced the faces, her father's kind eyes, her mother's gentle smile, Amira's protective stance beside a much younger version of herself. The image stirred something deep within her, a sense of belonging she'd lost long ago. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called out, expecting Maria with her evening tea. Instead, Hassan al-Rashid stood in her doorway, his unexpected presence making her start. "Mrs. al-Rahman," he said smoothly, "I hope I'm not interrupting." Sophia rose gracefully, her training taking over despite her surprise. "Mr. al-Rashid, I wasn't aware you were visiting. An impromptu meeting with your husband." He stepped into the room, his eyes taking in every detail of her appearance. "I must say the transformation is remarkable. You've exceeded all expectations." "The bet," she said flatly. "That's why you're here." Hassan's eyebrows rose slightly. "Ah, so you know about that." "Yes, I came to evaluate your progress. After all, the International Business Gala is approaching quickly." Sophia moved to her vanity, adjusting her already perfect hair in a gesture she'd learned conveyed casual dismissal. "I'm afraid you've wasted your time. The bet is cancelled." "Cancelled?" Hassan's reflection appeared behind hers in the mirror. "Did Karim tell you that? How interesting. Because our agreement was quite clear. 3 months of marriage, culminating in your presentation at the gala. Breaking that agreement comes with significant consequences." She turned to face him directly. "What consequences?" "Financial ones, primarily. The penalty clause is quite steep." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But more than that, it would be an admission of failure. Something I never thought I'd see from Karim al-Rahman." "You're trying to manipulate me," Sophia observed, her voice cool. "Rather clumsily, I might add." Hassan laughed softly. "You really have learned well. But consider this. Karim made a bet about transforming you into someone acceptable to our world. If he backs out now, what does that say about you?" "It says that I'm more than a bet," she replied firmly, "and that Karim finally realizes that too." "Does he?" Hassan moved closer, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "Or is he simply trying to protect Amira's little sister?" Sophia felt as if she'd been slapped. "You know?" "Of course I know. Karim and I have been rivals since university. Did you think I wouldn't investigate when he suddenly married a woman from the streets?" His smile turned predatory. "What I wonder is, what will you do with this information?" She lifted her chin, channeling every lesson in poise she'd learned. "Nothing, because it doesn't change who I am now." "Doesn't it?" Hassan circled her. Slowly. "You're Samira Hassan, sole heir to your family's considerable fortune, the fortune that's been held in trust all these years, waiting for proof of your survival. Quite convenient for Karim to find you first, wasn't it?" "Get out." The words were quiet but steel-edged. "Think about it, Mrs. al-Rahman, or should I say, Miss Hassan." He moved toward the door. "The gala is in 1 week. I look forward to seeing how this plays out." After he left, Sophia sank onto her bed, her mind racing. Hassan's words had planted seeds of doubt she thought she'd already overcome. Was Karim's confession of love real, or was he still trying to protect her? Was she truly more than an obligation to him? She stood abruptly, needing to move, to think. The mansion's halls were quiet at this hour, the staff having retired to their quarters. Her feet carried her to the music room, where a grand piano stood bathed in moonlight. Without thinking, she sat down and began to play. The melody came from somewhere deep in her memories, a lullaby Amira used to play. Her fingers remembered the notes even if her mind didn't, and soon the haunting tune filled the room. She closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. You play exactly like her. Sophia's eyes snapped open to find Karim standing in the doorway, his expression raw with emotion. I didn't know I could, she admitted softly. The memory just came back. He moved into the room but kept his distance. Hassan came to see you. Yes. She continued playing, the familiar melody anchoring her. He told me about the trust fund. Karim's shoulders tensed. I should have told you about that too. Why didn't you? She finally stopped playing, turning to face him fully. Were you afraid I'd think that was your real motivation? Partly, he admitted, but mostly because I wanted you to have time to find yourself before having to deal with all the complications of being Samira Hassan. And now? Now I realize I should have trusted you more. He took a step closer. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. You survived years on the streets, adapted to this new life, faced every challenge with grace, even the challenge of discovering your true identity. Sophia felt tears prick at her eyes. I don't know who I am anymore. Sophia, Samira, your wife, Amira's sister. All these different pieces of myself keep colliding. You're all of them, he said softly. And something more. Something entirely your own. She looked down at her hands, still resting on the piano keys. Hassan expects me to appear at the gala next week. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She met his gaze again. Not for the bet, not for Hassan, but for myself. I need to know I can do this, that I can face that world as myself, whoever that turns out to be. Karim moved closer still, until he was standing right beside the piano. Then let me help you. Not as your teacher or protector, but as your partner, if you'll have me. The week before the International Business Gala passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. Sophia's days were filled with last-minute refinements to her social skills, fittings for her gown, and increasingly intense conversations with Karim. The mansion buzzed with anticipation, but beneath the excitement lay an undercurrent of tension that everyone could feel. One evening, as Sophia stood for the final fitting of her gown, a masterpiece of midnight blue silk and subtle crystalline embellishments, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her transformation was complete, at least on the surface, but inside she felt like a butterfly emerging from its chrysalis, still testing its wings. You look absolutely stunning, miss, Maria said, adjusting the hem. Like a true princess. Sophia smiled softly. More like a lost princess who finally found her way home. She turned slightly, watching how the fabric caught the light. Though I'm not sure where home really is anymore. Sometimes home isn't a place, Maria replied wisely, pinning another section of the dress. Sometimes it's a person. Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock at the door. Karim entered, stopping short at the sight of her in the gown. For a moment, his carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing raw admiration and something deeper, something that made Sophia's heart skip a beat. The car is ready, he said, recovering himself. Are you sure you want to do this? Sophia nodded to Maria, who helped her step down from the fitting platform. You mean visit my family's old house? Yes, I'm sure. I need to do this before the gala. The drive through Dubai's exclusive residential district was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they finally pulled up to a magnificent villa, Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Memories flooded back, running through the garden with Amira, their mother tending to her beloved roses, their father reading stories on the terrace. "It's been maintained exactly as it was," Karim explained softly. "Part of the trust requirements. Nothing could be changed until you were found." Sophia stepped out of the car, her legs slightly unsteady. The evening air was cool against her skin as she walked toward the front door. Karim followed silently, giving her space to process the moment. Inside, time seemed to have stood still. The familiar furniture, the family photographs on the walls, even the faint scent of jasmine that their mother had loved. It was all exactly as she remembered. Sophia moved through the rooms like a woman in a dream, touching objects, allowing the memories to wash over her. In what had been Amira's room, she found a journal on the bedside table. With trembling fingers, she opened it to the last entry, dated just before everything had changed. Amira's elegant handwriting filled the page. "My dearest Samira is growing more beautiful every day. She has such a pure heart, such strength inside her. I know she will do extraordinary things someday. Karim says I'm too protective of her, but how can I not be? She's not just my sister, she's my heart walking around outside my body. No matter what happens, I will always watch over her." Tears splashed onto the page before Sophia realized she was crying. She felt Karim's presence in the doorway but couldn't look at him yet. "She was right about you," he said quietly. "About your strength, your extraordinary nature. She would be so proud of who you've become." Sophia carefully closed the journal, placing it back exactly where she'd found it. Would she? Proud of the woman who married her fiancé as part of a bet, who forgot her own identity for years. Proud of the woman who survived impossible odds, Karim corrected, stepping into the room. Who faced every challenge with grace and courage, who refused to be broken by the truth when she discovered it. She finally turned to face him. "And what about you? Are you proud of the woman you've created? Or do you still see Amira's little sister when you look at me?" Karim moved closer, his eyes intense. "What I see is the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Yes, you're Amira's sister, and that will always be part of who you are. But you're also so much more. You're Sophia, who survived on the streets without losing her dignity. You're Samira, who carried her family's strength inside her, even when she couldn't remember them. And you're my wife, not because of a bet or an obligation, but because fate brought us together in the most unexpected way." Sophia felt the walls around her heart trembling. "The gala tomorrow night. Everyone will be watching, judging. Hassan will be waiting for any sign that I don't belong." "Let them watch," Karim said firmly. "Let them see exactly who you are. Woman who bridges two worlds, who carries both strength and grace, who belongs wherever she chooses to be." She looked around the room one last time, at the memories of a life long past. Then she straightened her spine, lifting her chin in the way that had become natural to her. "You're right. Let them watch. Because tomorrow night, I'm not just proving I can belong in their world. I'm showing them that I can remake that world on my own terms." As they left the house, Sophia paused in the garden, looking up at the stars that had watched over her family for generations. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, she finally knew who she was, all of who she was. And that knowledge was more powerful than any transformation. The International Business Gala transformed Dubai's Grand Palace Hotel into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast their golden light over the gathering of the world's elite, while soft classical music floated through the air. It was everything Sophia had trained for, everything she had been prepared to face. She stood before the entrance, feeling Karim's steady presence beside her. Her midnight blue gown caught the light with every movement, the crystals sparkling like stars. Her dark hair was elegantly styled, her makeup flawless, her posture perfect. Yet it was the quiet confidence in her eyes that truly completed her transformation. "Ready?" Karim asked softly, offering his arm. Sophia took a deep breath, then placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Ready." They entered the ballroom together, and immediately all eyes turned toward them. Sophia could hear the whispers, see the curious glances, feel the weight of judgment, but instead of shrinking from it, she let it fuel her determination. Hassan materialized before them, his smile sharp as a blade. Mrs. Al-Rahman, you look absolutely stunning. One would never guess your humble beginnings. Thank you, Mr. Al-Rashid, Sophia replied smoothly. Though I've found that true humility comes from knowing exactly who you are, all of who you are. Hassan's smile faltered slightly at her pointed response. Before he could reply, other guests began approaching, drawn by curiosity about Karim Al-Rahman's mysterious new wife. Sophia handled each interaction perfectly, drawing on every lesson she'd learned. She discussed art with a French diplomat, debated economic policy with a Japanese businessman, and charmed a Russian oligarch's wife with her knowledge of classical music. With each conversation, the whispers around them changed from skeptical to impressed. "You're a natural," Karim murmured as they moved across the dance floor in perfect synchronization. "They're completely enchanted." "I had an excellent teacher," she replied, then added with a hint of mischief, "Several, actually." As they danced, Sophia caught glimpses of Hassan watching them, his expression growing increasingly sour. She knew he was waiting for her to make a mistake, to reveal herself as an imposter, but she was done playing by his rules. During a brief pause between dances, Hassan approached them again, this time with several influential board members in tow. "Mrs. Al-Rahman, these gentlemen were just asking about your background. Perhaps you'd like to share your fascinating story." The trap was obvious. He expected her to either lie or admit her past and face humiliation. Instead, Sophia smiled. "Serenely. My background, it's quite an extraordinary tale, actually." She pitched her voice to carry just far enough to attract attention from nearby guests. "You see, I was born Samira Hassan, daughter of one of Dubai's most respected families." A murmur went through the crowd. Several older guests straightened, recognition dawning in their eyes. "Through a series of unfortunate events, I was separated from my family at a young age. I survived on my own for many years, never knowing my true identity." She paused, her voice clear and strong. "Until fate brought me back to where I belonged, though not in the way anyone might have expected." Hassan's face had gone pale. "You're claiming to be Samira Hassan, the lost Hassan daughter." "I'm not claiming anything," Sophia replied calmly. "I am Samira Hassan. The birthmark on my shoulder, the DNA tests and the memories that have returned all confirm it. Though I prefer to go by Sophia now, it's the name I chose for myself during my years of survival, and it's as much a part of me as my birth name." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Even the music seemed to have faded away. "But more than that," she continued, turning to face the gathered crowd. "I am a woman who has lived in two worlds. I've known both desperate poverty and extraordinary privilege. I've experienced what it means to be judged by appearances and what it means to be valued for who you truly are." She felt Karim's hand slip into hers, offering silent support. "Some of you may have heard that my marriage to Karim Al-Rahman began as part of a bet, a challenge to transform a woman from the streets into someone acceptable to high society." Her gaze found Hassan's, holding it steadily. "What you don't know is that love has a way of transforming the transformers themselves." Karim stepped forward then, addressing the crowd himself. "The bet is hereby formally cancelled. Instead, I'm announcing the establishment of the Hassan Al-Rahman Foundation, which will provide education and opportunities for those who find themselves in circumstances similar to what my wife once faced. The initial funding will be twice the amount of the original bet." The silence burst into excited conversation. Sophia could see approval in many faces, respect in others, and pure shock in some. Hassan stood frozen, his carefully laid plans for humiliation completely undone. An elderly woman approached them, tears in her eyes. "I knew your mother well, my dear. She would be so proud of you, not just for surviving, but for using your experience to help others." As more guests came forward to express their support and share memories of her family, Sophia felt something settle inside her. She had faced her final test, not by hiding who she was, but by embracing all the parts of herself, the lost princess and the street survivor, the society wife and the independent spirit. She caught Karim watching her with an expression of pure love and pride, and in that moment she knew. The transformation wasn't just about her becoming acceptable to his world. It was about both of them learning to create a new world together, one that bridged all the divides between them. The morning sun painted the desert in shades of gold as Sophia stood in what had once been Amira's garden. 3 months had passed since the gala, since the night she had claimed both her past and her future in front of Dubai's elite. The jasmine bushes her mother had loved so much were blooming again, their sweet scent carrying memories of childhood laughter. She had moved back into her family home a week after the gala, not to reclaim the past, but to build something new. Karim had given her space to make the decision, understanding her need to reconnect with her roots, but he had also made it clear that his heart came with her, wherever she chose to go. The sound of footsteps on the garden path made her smile. She didn't need to turn to know it was Karim. She could recognize his presence now as easily as she recognized her own reflection. "The contractors will be here this afternoon," he said, coming to stand beside her. "Are you sure about this?" Sophia nodded, looking at the architectural plans spread out before her on the garden table. The Hassan al-Rahman Foundation would occupy the east wing of the mansion, transforming it into a center for education and empowerment. The rest would remain a home, their home. "This is exactly what this place needs," she replied. "A way to honor the past while building a better future." Karim's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Your parents would be proud. Amira too." "I think they would be," she agreed softly. "I've been reading more of her journals." She always believed that privilege came with responsibility, that those who had the power to help others had an obligation to do so. Like sister," Karim said with a gentle smile. Sophia turned to face him fully. The man before her had changed as much as she had over the past months. The cold, calculating businessman had given way to someone warmer, more open, more willing to let love guide his decisions. "Hassan sent another apology letter," she mentioned, watching Karim's reaction. "I saw it, along with his rather generous donation to the foundation." "Guilt money," Sophia said with a slight smirk, "but we'll put it to good use. The first class of students starts next month. 20 young women from challenging backgrounds, all determined to transform their lives." "Just like you did?" Karim asked, pulling her closer. "No," she corrected him. "Not like I did. They'll do it on their own terms, without any bets or hidden agendas, just support, education, and the chance to discover who they really are." The morning breeze carried the sound of construction vehicles arriving at the front of the mansion. Soon, the transformation of the East Wing would begin. But the most important transformations had already taken place in the hearts of those who stood in the garden. "You know," Sophia said thoughtfully, "when you found me in that alley, you thought you were going to transform a street woman into a society lady. Instead, you helped me find my way back to myself, and in the process found your way back to your own heart." Karim touched her cheek gently. "You transformed me more than I ever transformed you. You showed me that real change comes not from trying to make someone into something they're not, but from helping them discover who they truly are." "And who am I, truly?" she asked, though she already knew his answer. "You're Sophia Hassan al-Rahman," he replied, his eyes full of love. "A woman who bridges worlds, who transforms lives, who chose to create beauty from pain. And you're the woman I fall in love with more deeply every day." She reached up to touch the crescent-shaped birthmark on her shoulder, no longer a symbol of lost identity, but a connection to all the parts of herself she had reclaimed. "We never did finish that bet properly," she teased. 3 months of marriage was the requirement, wasn't it?" "True," Karim acknowledged with a smile. "Though I hope you'll consider extending the contract, perhaps indefinitely." "Indefinitely?" Sophia pretended to consider it carefully. "That's quite a commitment, Mr. Al-Rahman." "Worth every moment, Mrs. Al-Rahman," he replied, drawing her into a kiss that tasted of jasmine and promise. Above them, the desert sun continued its eternal dance across the sky, casting ever-changing shadows across the garden. But Sophia, And Karim had learned that true transformations happen in the heart, where love turns strangers into family and past pain into future purpose. The mansion would soon be filled with young voices, with dreams being built and lives being changed. And at its heart would remain a love story that began with a bet, but transformed into something far more precious, a reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys lead us right back home to a place we never knew we were looking for. Fim Da. Historia. Dear listeners, we hope you've been touched by Sophia and Karim's journey of transformation and love. Their story reminds us that true change comes not from becoming someone else, but from discovering who we really are. If this tale of love, identity, and redemption has moved you, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like. For more captivating stories that explore the depths of human connection and transformation, check out our specially curated playlist by clicking the link to your left. Join our community in the comments below to share your thoughts on this extraordinary journey of the heart. Remember, the most beautiful transformations often come from embracing all the parts of who we are